The detention chamber hummed with an energy field that could stop a charging battle mech. Captain Markuschan sat in perfect stillness on the cold metal bench, his hands folded calmly in his lap. 3 days had passed since his capture, and the Zephyrian Empire's most elite interrogators had tried everything they knew to break his spirit. They had underestimated humans before. It would not be the last time. The heavy door slid open with a mechanical hiss, and Commander Vexstar entered. The towering reptilian warrior stood 8 feet tall, his scaled hide bearing the scars of countless battles across the galaxy. His yellow eyes gleamed with predatory intelligence as he studied the human prisoner who had caused so much trouble for the Empire. Captain Chen, Vexstar's voice carried the authority of someone who had crushed rebellions on 17 worlds. You continue to surprise us with your stubbornness. Marcus looked up slowly, meeting the alien's gaze without fear. I prefer to think of it as loyalty to my crew and my species, Commander. Something your Empire seems to have forgotten the meaning of. Vexstar's jaw tensed. The human's calm defiance was already irritating him, just as it had frustrated the previous interrogators. Your ship is destroyed. Your crew is dead. Earth's defense fleet lies in ruins around your homeworld. Yet you still refuse to provide the access codes to your military databases. My crew knew the risks when we volunteered for this mission, Marcus replied quietly. And if you think a few threats will make me betray everything I've sworn to protect, you clearly don't understand humans very well. The Zephyrian commander circled the small chamber like a predator stalking wounded prey. Oh, but we do understand humans, Captain. We understand that you are weak creatures who break easily under pressure. Your species has only existed in space for 2 centuries. We have conquered galaxies for over 10,000 years. Marcus remained silent, which seemed to anger Vexstar even more. Do you know what happened to the last human settlement that refused to surrender? Vexstar leaned closer, his breath hot against Marcus's face. We turned their own atmosphere processors against them. Men, women, children all suffocated slowly while begging for mercy that never came. And yet here you are, trying to get information from one human prisoner instead of simply taking what you want, Marcus observed. That suggests our defenses are stronger than you expected, doesn't it? Vexstar's clawed hand slammed against the wall beside Marcus's head, leaving deep gouges in the metal. You will give us those codes, human. One way or another. No, Marcus said simply. I won't. The next several hours blurred together in a haze of physical and mental torture techniques that the Zephyrian Empire had perfected over millennia. Neural probes that sent waves of agony through every nerve ending. Sonic frequencies that made thinking impossible. Chemical agents that induced panic and despair. Marcus endured it all. When Vexstar finally called for a rest period, he was breathing heavily and his scales glistened with sweat. The human prisoner, meanwhile, sat exactly as he had hours before, calm, centered, and unbroken. How? Vexstar demanded. How are you resisting techniques that have broken the strongest warriors in the galaxy? Marcus looked up at his captor with something that might have been pity. You're thinking about this all wrong, Commander. You see pain and suffering as weapons to be used against an enemy. But, humans, we've learned to see them as challenges to overcome. Explain. Every culture in human history has faced extinction at some point, Marcus continued. Plague, war, natural disasters, our own stupidity, we've survived them all. Not because we're stronger or smarter than other species, but because we refuse to give up. When everything seems hopeless, when any rational being would surrender, humans dig deeper and find something more. Vexstar's eyes narrowed. Pretty words will not save you. They're not just words, Marcus replied. They're the reason your empire is going to lose this war. Before Vexstar could respond, the chamber door opened again. This time, 2 figures entered that made the Zephyrian commander step back in respect. The first was General Korthak, the Empire's most feared military strategist. The second was Lady Siren, whose mastery of psychic manipulation had broken the minds of rebel leaders across a dozen star systems. Commander Vexstar, General Korthak's voice rumbled like distant thunder. You have had 3 days with this prisoner and gained nothing. Stand aside. Vexstar's pride was wounded, but he knew better than to argue with his superior. General, the human is unusually resistant to standard techniques. So I have heard. Korthak studied Marcus with calculating eyes. The general was a massive being, even larger than Vexstar, with cybernetic implants that enhanced his already formidable presence.
Captain Chen, I presume.
General, Marcus acknowledged with a slight nod.
You interest me, human.
In my 500 years of military service, I have encountered only a handful of beings who could resist Commander Vexstar's methods for more than a few hours.
Most were enhanced through genetic modification or cybernetic augmentation. Yet our scans show you are completely natural. Disappointing for your scientists, I'm sure. Korthak's laugh was like grinding stone. Indeed.
Lady Siren, perhaps you would like to examine our guest more closely? The psychic warrior stepped forward, and Marcus felt an immediate change in the chamber's atmosphere. Lady Siren appeared almost human at first glance, but her pale blue skin and completely black eyes marked her as something far more dangerous. Her species, the Nethys, were born with the ability to reach into minds and tear them apart from the inside. Hello, Marcus, her voice seemed to come from inside his own thoughts rather than his ears.
Such an interesting mind you have. So many barriers, so many defenses.
But everyone breaks eventually. Marcus closed his eyes and focused on his breathing, drawing upon techniques he had learned during his years of military training.
Lady Siren, I presume. Your reputation precedes you.
As does yours, apparently. Siren began to circle him slowly, her mental probes testing the edges of his consciousness.
Tell me, what do you see when you look at me?
I see someone who's forgotten what it means to fight for something bigger than herself, Marcus replied without opening his eyes. Siren's mental touch became sharper, more invasive.
How delightfully naive. And what do you fight for, little human? Your primitive species that will be extinct within the century? Your homeworld that even now burns under our assault?
Images flashed through Marcus's mind, scenes of destruction that Siren was projecting directly into his thoughts.
Earth's major cities in flames, human ships being destroyed by the thousands, children crying for parents who would never return.
Impressive illusions, Marcus said calmly. But I know the difference between fear and reality.
Do you? Siren's mental assault intensified. Can you be so sure? How do you know that everything you're seeing isn't real? How do you know that your sacrifice means anything at all?
For a moment, doubt crept into Marcus's mind. The images were so vivid, so convincing. But then, he remembered something his grandfather had told him long ago, back when he was just a child afraid of monsters in the dark.
Fear is just a feeling, Marcus, the old man had said. It can't hurt you unless you let it.
And the strongest people are not those who never feel fear, they're the ones who feel it and choose to act anyway. Marcus opened his eyes and looked directly at Lady Siren.
You want to know what I fight for?
I fight for the idea that no being, no matter how powerful, has the right to decide the fate of another species.
I fight for the belief that freedom is worth any sacrifice.
And I fight for the hope that somewhere in this galaxy, there are still beings who remember what honor means. Siren stepped back, her black eyes wide with something that might have been shock.
Impossible. No mind can resist a direct psychic assault while maintaining such clarity of thought.
Maybe that's because you've never encountered a species that was forged in fire, Marcus replied.
Humans don't break, Lady Siren.
We bend, we adapt, and we come back stronger. General Korthak moved closer, his cybernetic implants whirring as they analyzed every aspect of Marcus's physiology.
Fascinating.
Your stress indicators show that you are indeed experiencing the full effect of Lady Siren's abilities, yet your mental state remains stable.
How is this possible?
Practice, Marcus said simply. Every human child learns to face their fears.
It's part of how we grow up.
You can't terrorize a species that has already looked into the abyss and decided to laugh at it.
Your bravado will not save your species, Korthak growled.
Maybe not, Marcus agreed. But it will make your victory cost more than you ever imagined. The three elite guards exchanged glances. In all their years of service to the Empire, they had never encountered resistance like this. The human should have broken hours ago, should have been begging for mercy and offering any information they wanted. Instead, he sat there like an immovable mountain, absorbing everything they could throw at him and remaining utterly unshaken.
Perhaps, Vexstar suggested, we should try a different approach.
The human clearly cares about his species. We could arrange for him to watch as we destroy human colonies one by one until he cooperates. Marcus's expression hardened.
That won't work either, Commander.
You see, humans have something your empire has never understood, the ability to find hope even in the darkest circumstances.
Every human colony you destroy will only strengthen the resolve of those who remain. You're not fighting an army or a government. You're fighting an idea.
And ideas are much harder to kill than people.
Lady Siren probed deeper into his mind, searching for any weakness she could exploit.
What she found there made her take another step backward. General, she said quietly, this human's mind, it's unlike anything I've ever encountered.
There are layers upon layers of psychological defenses, but they're not artificial constructs.
They're natural adaptations, developed through a lifetime of facing adversity and choosing to persevere.
Explain, Korthak demanded. It's as if his entire species has been psychologically conditioned by their evolutionary history to resist despair. Every technique we use against him only activates deeper reserves of determination.
We're not breaking him down, we're making him stronger. Marcus smiled for the first time since his capture.
She's beginning to understand. You want to know the real difference between humans and the other species you've conquered? They fought you because they had to. We fight you because we choose to. General Korthak's cybernetic eye flared as he processed this information.
You speak as if this war is far from over, human.
Your homeworld is surrounded. Your fleet is destroyed. What possible reason do you have for such confidence? Because you made one critical mistake, General. You assumed that because humans are young compared to your empire, we must be weak. But youth can also mean adaptability.
While you've spent thousands of years perfecting the same tactics against the same types of enemies, we've been learning to face challenges that would destroy older, more established species. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on a tone of quiet intensity.
Do you know what happened to the last aliens who tried to conquer Earth, General?
They had technology far superior to ours. They had weapons that could crack continents. They had every advantage except one.
And what was that?
Korthak found himself asking despite his better judgment.
They underestimated human stubbornness. We didn't defeat them with superior firepower or brilliant strategy. We defeated them by simply refusing to stay defeated.
Every time they knocked us down, we got back up. Every time they destroyed one of our cities, we built two more.
They won every battle, but they lost the war because they couldn't break our will to keep fighting.
The chamber fell silent except for the hum of the containment field. For the first time in their long military careers, the three elite guards found themselves genuinely uncertain about how to proceed.
Commander Vextar broke the silence first.
Your stories of past victories mean nothing here, human.
This is not your homeworld. There is no rescue coming. You will eventually break. Will I? Marcus asked quietly.
You've been trying for 3 days now, and I'm still here.
Still unbroken. Still protecting the secrets you want so badly. How much time are you willing to invest in one human prisoner, Commander?
It was a fair question, and one that clearly troubled Vextar. The Empire's assault on Earth was proceeding, but every day they spent trying to extract information from this one human was a day that could be used for more productive military operations.
General Korthak seemed to read his subordinate's thoughts. Time is indeed a factor, Commander. But the strategic value of the information this human possesses cannot be underestimated. If we could access Earth's quantum communication network, we could monitor every human military transmission in real time.
Which is exactly why I'll never give you those codes, Marcus said firmly. Not if you torture me for 1,000 years. Lady Siren stepped forward again, her mental presence pressing against Marcus's consciousness like a cold tide. Your resolve is admirable, human, but ultimately futile. I have broken beings who thought themselves unbreakable. I have shattered minds that believed they were prepared for anything. You are just one man.
That's where you're wrong, Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the psychic assault he was enduring. I'm not just one man.
I'm the product of countless generations of humans who refused to give up in the face of impossible odds. Every time you try to break me, you're not just fighting Marcus Chen, you're fighting the accumulated determination of my entire species. The words seemed to hang in the air like a challenge. General Korthak's strategic mind was already calculating the implications of what the human was saying. If this level of resistance was typical of the human species rather than exceptional, the conquest of Earth might prove far more difficult than anticipated. "You cannot speak for your entire species," Korthak said finally.
"Can't I?" Marcus asked. "Have you studied human history, General? Do you know about the wars we've fought against impossible odds? The disasters we've survived? The times we've literally chosen to die rather than surrender our principles?" Korthak's cybernetic implants began accessing the Empire's xenological database on human civilization.
What he found there made his expression grow increasingly grim.
"Thermopylae," he said quietly. "The Warsaw Ghetto. The Siege of Stalingrad. Operation Market Garden. The Last Stand at Firebase Charlie."
"You've done your homework," Marcus acknowledged.
"Those are just the famous ones.
Human history is full of people who chose to endure the impossible rather than compromise their values. We're not stronger than other species, General.
We're just more stubborn." Commander Vextar's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Enough of this philosophical debate. The human will break because all beings break eventually. It is simply a matter of finding the right pressure point."
But, even as he spoke the words, Vextar could see the doubt in his colleague's eyes. 3 of the Empire's most skilled interrogators had thrown everything they had at one human prisoner, and he remained as defiant as ever. Marcus noticed their uncertainty and pressed his advantage.
"You're beginning to understand, aren't you? This isn't just about me anymore. It's about what I represent.
Every human you encounter is going to be just as difficult to break, just as unwilling to surrender. How much time and resources are you prepared to invest in conquering a species that simply will not stay conquered?"
The question struck at the heart of the Empire's strategic doctrine. Their standard approach was to demonstrate overwhelming superiority, break the enemy's will to resist, and then integrate the conquered territory into their expanding domain. But what did you do when the enemy's will could not be broken?
Lady Siren made one final attempt to crack Marcus's mental defenses, pouring all of her psychic power into a concentrated assault on his consciousness. For a moment, the chamber filled with an almost tangible sense of malevolent force as she tried to tear his mind apart from the inside. Marcus closed his eyes and endured. When the attack finally ended, he opened them again and looked directly at the exhausted psychic warrior.
"Is that the best you can do?" he asked quietly.
Siren staggered backward, her face pale with shock and fatigue.
"Impossible. That should have reduced your mind to fragments." "Maybe it would have, if you were fighting just me," Marcus replied.
"But you're fighting something much bigger than one human consciousness. You're fighting the collective will of a species that has never learned how to give up." General Korthak stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. "You speak as if this resistance is some kind of shared trait among your people. But surely individuals vary in their capacity for endurance." "Of course they do," Marcus agreed. "Some humans are naturally braver than others, naturally more stubborn. But even the most timid human child learns early that some things are worth suffering for. It's part of our culture, our psychology, our very identity as a species."
"And what, exactly, are you suffering for now?" Vextar demanded.
Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a conviction that seemed to fill the small chamber. "I'm suffering for the right of my species to determine its own destiny. For the children who will grow up free instead of slaves. For the possibility that someday, somewhere in this galaxy, beings will be judged by their character rather than their military strength." He looked directly at each of his captors in turn. "I'm suffering for the hope that even the Zephyrian Empire might eventually learn that conquest and domination are not the only paths to greatness." The 3 elite guards stood in silence, each wrestling with thoughts they had never expected to have. In all their years of service, they had never encountered a prisoner who could turn an interrogation into a philosophical debate about the nature of freedom and resistance. "Your idealism is touching," General Korthak said finally. "But ultimately irrelevant. The Empire will expand, with or without your cooperation. The only question is how much unnecessary suffering will occur in the process." "Then, that's a choice you'll have to live with," Marcus replied.
"But I won't be the one who makes it easier for you to enslave my people. As the day wore on, the three interrogators took turns trying different approaches. Vextar attempted to wear Marcus down through physical discomfort and deprivation. Lady Siren probed for emotional vulnerabilities and traumatic memories. General Korthak engaged in strategic discussions designed to make Marcus doubt the wisdom of continued resistance. Nothing worked. With each passing hour, it became increasingly clear that they were not dealing with an ordinary prisoner. This human seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to endure whatever they threw at him while maintaining perfect mental clarity and unshakable resolve. As the artificial day cycle in the detention facility began to dim toward evening, the three elite guards found themselves facing an unprecedented situation. For the first time in their distinguished careers, they had encountered a being they could not break. Marcus sat in the same position he had maintained all day, his hands folded calmly in his lap, his breathing steady and controlled. He looked exactly as he had when they first entered the chamber that morning, tired but unbroken, battered but not defeated. "This is impossible," Vextar muttered under his breath. "No," Marcus corrected gently. "This is human." And, in that simple statement lay the beginning of a revelation that would ultimately change the course of the war between Earth and the Zephyrian Empire. The three elite guards were starting to realize that they were not just fighting an enemy, they were confronting a completely different way of understanding existence itself. The human sat before them like a living embodiment of principles they had never truly understood: courage without hope of victory, loyalty without promise of reward, and determination that drew its strength from something deeper than mere survival instinct. As the first day of intensive interrogation drew to a close, one thing had become perfectly clear. Whatever happened next, Marcus Chen would not be the one who broke first. The second day began with General Korthak entering the detention chamber alone. Marcus had spent the night in meditation, a practice that seemed to puzzle his captors more than any display of defiance could have. The general's cybernetic implants hummed quietly as he analyzed the human's vital signs. "You slept peacefully," Korthak observed. "Most prisoners in your situation experience nightmares, anxiety attacks, or complete psychological breakdown by this point." Marcus opened his eyes slowly, his gaze clear and steady. "Sleep is just another challenge to overcome, General. My grandfather used to say that a person who can find peace in chaos has already won half the battle." "Your grandfather seems to have been quite the philosopher." "He was a farmer," Marcus replied simply. "But farmers understand something that warriors sometimes forget: the value of patience. You plant seeds, tend them carefully, and wait for the right season to harvest. Some things can't be rushed." Korthak's strategic mind immediately grasped the implication. "You believe time is on your side in this conflict?" "I believe that truth has a way of revealing itself, regardless of how many weapons you point at it." Marcus stood slowly and walked to the small window that showed the starfield beyond. "Tell me, General, in all your centuries of conquest, have you ever encountered a species that got stronger the more pressure you applied?" "That is not possible. All matter has a breaking point." Marcus turned back to face him. "Matter, yes. But what about ideas? What about beliefs that become more powerful when challenged? You've been thinking about humans as if we're just another species to be conquered. But what if we're something else entirely? Explain. What if we're a species that was literally forged by adversity? Earth isn't a peaceful garden world, General. It's a planet that has tried to kill everything living on it for billions of years. Ice ages, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, plague, famine, natural disasters of every conceivable type. Yet life not only survived, it thrived." Marcus began to pace slowly around the small chamber. "Other species evolved on stable worlds with predictable climates and abundant resources. They developed advanced technology because they had the luxury of long-term planning. But humans evolved in chaos. We learned to adapt, to improvise, to find solutions that no rational being would consider." Korthak's cybernetic eye focused intently on the human. "You speak as if chaos were an advantage rather than a weakness. Isn't it? Your empire has spent thousands of years perfecting the art of imposed order. You have detailed plans for every scenario, sophisticated protocols for every situation. But what happens when the unexpected occurs? What happens when your enemy doesn't follow the rules you've written for them?" The question struck closer to home than Korthak cared to admit.
The human resistance had already defied Imperial predictions in several key engagements. Their tactics seemed random, almost suicidal, yet they had achieved results that shouldn't have been possible.
Chaos cannot defeat order indefinitely, Korthak stated, though his voice lacked its usual certainty.
Can't it?
Marcus smiled slightly. General, do you know why human children play games?
The sudden change of subject caught Korthak off guard.
Entertainment, presumably. No.
They play games to learn how to lose. Marcus sat back down, his expression becoming more serious.
That's something other species don't understand about us.
Human children spend years learning how to fail, how to get back up, how to try again. By the time we reach adulthood, we've already experienced defeat thousands of times and learned that it's not the end of the world.
Your point? Your entire military doctrine is based on the assumption that a decisive defeat will break your enemy's will to continue fighting.
But, you can't use defeat as a weapon against a species that has already learned to treat failure as a learning experience. The chamber door opened, and Commander Vexstar entered with Lady Siren.
Both looked as though they had spent the night planning new approaches to break the stubborn human prisoner.
General, Vexstar said formally.
We have prepared a new series of stress tests for the prisoner. Lady Siren believes she has identified potential weak points in his psychological defenses. Marcus looked at the three aliens with something approaching sympathy.
You're going to exhaust yourselves trying to break something that can't be broken.
Wouldn't your time be better spent trying to understand why I can't be broken?
Because you are one individual among billions, Siren replied, her mental presence already beginning to probe at the edges of Marcus's consciousness.
Surely your resistance cannot be typical of your entire species. Actually, it is, Marcus said calmly. That's what you keep refusing to understand. I'm not exceptional among humans, Lady Siren. I'm completely ordinary. Any human military officer would respond exactly as I have. Impossible. Is it? Have you studied our military history? Do you know about the Bataan Death March? The Hanoi Hilton? The prison camps of the Korean War? Human soldiers have been enduring unendurable treatment for centuries. We've learned to make resistance itself into an art form. Siren's psychic assault intensified, flooding Marcus's mind with images of pain, loss, and despair.
This time she added something new: visions of what would happen to Earth's civilian population if the war continued.
Marcus absorbed the mental attack without flinching. Impressive technique, Lady Siren.
But, you're still thinking like a predator trying to terrorize prey.
Humans aren't prey animals. We're persistence hunters. What does that mean? Vexstar demanded.
It means we evolved to chase down animals much larger and faster than ourselves simply by refusing to give up. A human hunter could track a mammoth for days, weeks if necessary, until the massive creature collapsed from exhaustion. We didn't win through superior strength or speed. We won by being too stubborn to quit. Marcus stood and faced his three captors directly.
That's what you're dealing with now. A species that specializes in outlasting opponents who should be able to defeat us easily. Every day you spend trying to break me is a day you're not making progress in your war.
And every day your war drags on, more humans are learning to adapt to your tactics. General Korthak's strategic mind was beginning to see the larger implications. You're suggesting that prolonged resistance is actually strengthening your species' war effort.
I'm not suggesting it, General. I'm stating it as a fact.
Right now, on Earth and in human colonies throughout this system, our people are studying every engagement with your forces. They're learning your patterns, adapting to your technology, developing countermeasures you haven't even imagined yet. Your technology is centuries behind ours, Vexstar protested.
Our current technology, yes.
But, technological gaps can be closed much faster than cultural ones. You're fighting with weapons and tactics developed over thousands of years of stable expansion. We're fighting with the desperate creativity of a species that has never had the luxury of predictable victory. Lady Siren tried a different approach, reaching into Marcus's mind and attempting to amplify any traces of doubt or fear she could find. What she discovered there made her step backward in shock.
General, she said quietly, this human, he's not suppressing his fear and doubt. He's genuinely converting them into determination. Every threat we make only strengthens his resolve. Explain, Korthak demanded.
It's as if his mind has been conditioned to treat adversity as fuel for resistance rather than a reason for surrender.
The more pressure we apply, the more his psychological defenses solidify. Marcus nodded approvingly. She's beginning to understand. You see, fear is just another form of information to humans.
It tells us that something important is at stake, that we need to focus our attention and resources on meeting a challenge. But, surely, Vexstar interjected, there must be some limit to your endurance.
Some point at which even human stubbornness must break.
Maybe, Marcus admitted. But, you'll never find it using the methods you've been trained in. You're trying to break my spirit by showing me how hopeless my situation is. But, humans have been facing hopeless situations since before we developed agriculture. We've learned to find hope in places where it logically shouldn't exist.
Where?
Korthak asked, genuinely curious despite himself. Marcus was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts.
In the simple act of refusal itself. Every minute I sit here without giving you what you want is a minute in which a human has successfully resisted the greatest military power in the galaxy. That's not hopeless, that's miraculous.
One man's resistance means nothing against the power of the Empire, Vexstar declared.
Doesn't it? Marcus asked. Then, why are 3 of your most elite operatives spending days trying to break one ordinary human? If my resistance means nothing, why not just move on to more important matters? The question hung in the air like an accusation. All 3 aliens realized that the human had identified a fundamental flaw in their approach.
They were treating him as if his resistance were significant while simultaneously trying to convince him that it was meaningless.
Your cooperation would save time and resources, Korthak said finally.
My cooperation would give you access to communication networks that coordinate the defense of 17 human colonies, Marcus corrected.
That's not a minor convenience, General. That's a strategic advantage that could determine the outcome of this entire war.
Lady Siren made another attempt to penetrate Marcus's mental defenses, this time focusing on memories of his family and friends. She found images of a woman and 2 children, clearly people Marcus cared deeply about. She began to craft visions of them in danger, threatened by Imperial forces. Marcus felt the psychic assault but responded in a way that shocked all 3 aliens. Instead of becoming distressed or angry, he actually smiled.
Thank you, Lady Siren. What? You just reminded me why I'm here.
For a moment, sitting in this chamber arguing philosophy, I almost forgot about Sarah and the kids.
Now I remember exactly what I'm protecting. Siren's attack had backfired completely.
Instead of breaking Marcus's resolve, it had reminded him of the most powerful motivation for resistance. This is not possible, she whispered.
I showed you your family in mortal danger.
You should be begging to cooperate in order to save them. My family understood the risks when I accepted this mission, Marcus replied. They also understand that the best way I can protect them is by ensuring that the Empire can't monitor human military communications. Every sacrifice means something when it's made for the right reasons.
Commander Vexstar's frustration was reaching a breaking point. Your noble sentiments will not save your family or your species, human.
The Empire will expand regardless of your cooperation. The only question is whether that expansion will be relatively quick and merciful or prolonged and brutal.
That's where you're wrong, Commander.
The speed and brutality of your expansion will determine whether the Empire survives this war.
Explain that statement, Korthak ordered.
Marcus leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on an educational tone. Your empire has been successful because you've conquered species that were willing to trade freedom for peace.
But, what happens when you encounter a species that values freedom more than peace? What happens when the very act of conquest creates more resistance than it eliminates?
You speak as if your species has some special immunity to military defeat.
Not immunity, General.
Something much more dangerous, the ability to learn from defeat and become stronger because of it.
Every human colony you destroy will generate 10 more resistance cells. Every human ship you sink will teach us something new about your weaknesses. Every day this war continues, you're creating more enemies than you're eliminating. The 3 aliens exchanged uneasy glances.
The human's words carried the ring of truth, and their own intelligence reports were beginning to support his claims. Human resistance was indeed growing stronger and more coordinated despite continued military defeats.
You cannot win a war through moral superiority alone, Lady Siren pointed out. Who said anything about moral superiority? Marcus asked. I'm talking about strategic adaptability. Your empire is like a massive machine designed to crush static targets. But humans are like water, we flow around obstacles, find the smallest cracks, and eventually wear down even the strongest barriers. Korthak's cybernetic implants were rapidly processing tactical data from across the human conflict zone. The pattern Marcus described was indeed emerging. Human forces were becoming more unpredictable, more creative, and more effective with each passing week. Even if your species possesses unusual adaptability, Korthak said slowly, you still face overwhelming numerical and technological disadvantages. General, do you know how many species the human military has studied over the past century? I assume you will tell me. All of them. Every species we've encountered, every alien technology we've observed, every tactical innovation we've witnessed, we've absorbed it all and integrated the best elements into our own military doctrine. Marcus stood and began pacing again. While your empire has been perfecting the same conquest strategies for thousands of years, humans have been learning from everyone we've met. Including us? Especially you. Right now, human engineers are studying captured Imperial technology and developing countermeasures. Human psychologists are analyzing your interrogation techniques and teaching resistance methods. Human strategists are identifying patterns in your fleet movements and designing ambush tactics specifically tailored to exploit your operational habits. Vextar slammed his fist against the wall. Enough! Your boasts mean nothing. You are one prisoner in one cell on one ship. Whatever grand strategies your species might be developing, you will not live to see them implemented. Is that a threat, Commander? It is a statement of fact. Your usefulness to the Empire is limited. If you will not provide the information we require voluntarily, it will be extracted through other means. Marcus met Vextar's angry gaze without flinching. And, if you kill me in the process? Then, you will have died for nothing. Will I? Marcus asked quietly. Commander, how many Imperial personnel have been assigned to this interrogation? How many hours of your most elite operatives' time have been invested in trying to break one human prisoner? How many resources have been diverted from active military operations? The questions hit home. Korthak's strategic mind immediately began calculating the opportunity costs of the extended interrogation. Dozens of personnel, multiple days of effort, significant computational and logistical resources all focused on extracting information from a single prisoner who showed no signs of breaking. Your point is noted, Korthak said grimly. My point, General, is that human resistance imposes costs even when it fails. Every day you spend trying to break me is a day that your other operations are understaffed and under-resourced. Every Imperial soldier focused on guarding human prisoners is a soldier who isn't advancing your conquest objectives. Marcus sat back down, his expression thoughtful. But, there's something else you should consider. Something much more important than resource allocation or tactical efficiency. Which is the effect this interrogation is having on the three of you. The aliens stared at him in surprise. It was not a topic they had expected him to raise. You came into this chamber expecting to break a primitive alien through superior technique and overwhelming force. Instead, you've spent 2 days engaged in philosophical debates about the nature of resistance, courage, and sacrifice. Whether you realize it or not, I've already changed you. Lady Siren's psychic senses confirmed what Marcus was saying. All three of them were indeed different than they had been when the interrogation began. They were thinking about concepts that had never occurred to them before, questioning assumptions they had held for centuries. Your attempt at psychological manipulation is transparent, Vextar growled. Is it manipulation, or is it simply the natural result of prolonged contact with a different way of thinking? Marcus asked. You've been trying to break my will, but, in the process, you've been forced to examine your own beliefs about power, loyalty, and the value of individual resistance. Korthak found himself grudgingly respecting the human's analytical abilities. You suggest that resistance can be contagious? I suggest that ideas are more powerful than weapons, General. And, the idea that ordinary individuals can successfully resist overwhelming force is one of the most dangerous concepts your empire could encounter. Because it undermines the foundations of imperial authority, Siren realized. Exactly.
Your entire system depends on the belief that resistance is futile, that submission to superior force is the only rational choice.
But, what happens when beings start to realize that some things are more important than survival? What happens when the fear of death becomes less powerful than the desire for freedom?
The three elite guards stood in silence, each grappling with implications they had never considered before. The human prisoner had turned their interrogation into something far more dangerous than a simple extraction of military intelligence. He had made them question the fundamental principles of their own civilization.
This conversation has gone far enough, Vextar declared. Tomorrow, we will use more direct methods to extract the information we require. Marcus looked at him with something that might have been pity. Commander, you still don't understand.
There are no more direct methods. What you're seeing now is as direct as it gets. One being choosing to endure whatever you can inflict rather than betray his principles. You can torture my body, assault my mind, threaten everything I hold dear, but you cannot change the fact that I have made a choice.
All choices can be unmade, Siren said, though her voice lacked conviction. Can they? Then, unmake this one. I choose to resist. I choose to endure. I choose to protect the information you want, regardless of the cost to myself. Change that choice, Lady Siren.
Show me the technique that can alter a decision made from absolute conviction.
Siren realized that she could not.
In all her years of psychic manipulation, she had never encountered a mind so completely committed to a single course of action that no amount of pressure could create even a moment of doubt. The human speaks truly, she admitted reluctantly. His decision is not based on hope or fear or calculation.
It is based on principle. And principles cannot be broken through external force.
Then, we have learned something valuable, Korthak said slowly. We have encountered the limits of our own methods.
Marcus nodded approvingly. That's the beginning of wisdom, General. The recognition that some challenges cannot be overcome through the application of superior force.
As the second day of interrogation drew to a close, the three elite guards found themselves in an unprecedented situation. They had not only failed to break their prisoner, they had been fundamentally changed by the experience of trying to do so. The human sat before them exactly as he had for the past 2 days, unbroken and uncompromising. But something in the chamber had shifted.
The interrogation was no longer about extracting information from a prisoner.
It had become a philosophical examination of the nature of power, resistance, and the indomitable human spirit. And, for the first time in their long careers, the three most elite interrogators in the Zephyrian Empire were beginning to wonder if they were on the right side of this war. The third day brought an unexpected change to the interrogation routine. Instead of the usual parade of torture devices and psychological pressure tactics, General Korthak entered the chamber alone, carrying a simple chair and what appeared to be a data tablet. Marcus watched with interest as the massive alien set up the chair across from his position and sat down with surprising grace for such a large being.
No torture instruments today, General?
No, Korthak replied simply. I have spent considerable time reviewing our previous sessions, and I have reached certain conclusions about the effectiveness of our current approach.
Which are? That we have been asking the wrong questions.
Korthak activated the data tablet, and holographic displays began appearing in the air between them.
Instead of trying to break your resistance, I would like to understand it.
You claim that your ability to endure our interrogation methods is typical of your species.
I find this difficult to believe.
Marcus studied the holographic data with genuine interest.
What am I looking at?
Psychological profiles of prisoners from 17 different species that the Empire has conquered over the past millennium. Each one was subjected to interrogation techniques identical to those we have used on you. In every case, complete psychological breakdown occurred within 72 hours.
Impressive database, General. But, I noticed something interesting about your sample set.
Which is? All of these species developed on worlds with stable ecosystems and predictable environments. Look at this one, the Altarians evolved on a planet where the temperature varied by less than 5 degrees throughout the entire year. The Vegan Confederation species never experienced natural disasters more severe than occasional thunderstorms. Korthak leaned forward, his cybernetic implants focusing on Marcus with increased intensity.
You believe environmental factors explain your resistance?
I believe they're part of it. But there's something else your analysis is missing, something that makes humans fundamentally different from every other species you've encountered.
Explain.
Marcus gestured toward the holographic displays. Every one of these species achieved spaceflight through gradual, peaceful development. They had thousands of years to perfect their technology, to develop stable governments, to create sophisticated civilizations. Humans reached space in less than a century, and we did it while simultaneously fighting the most destructive wars in our planet's history. I fail to see how this relates to your current resistance.
Don't you?
General, humans achieved nuclear technology and rocket propulsion during global conflicts that killed millions of people. We learned to split atoms while cities were being bombed. We reached the moon while fighting a war that threatened the existence of our civilization.
Korthak's strategic mind began to process the implications.
You developed advanced technology under extreme stress. More than that, we developed it because of extreme stress.
Human innovation accelerates when we're facing existential threats.
Other species advance through careful research and gradual improvement.
Humans advance through desperate necessity and impossible deadlines.
A fascinating theory, but hardly relevant to our current situation.
Isn't it?
General, right now, Earth is facing the greatest existential threat in human history.
Your empire represents the ultimate test of human adaptability. Do you really think our scientists and engineers are sitting around waiting for the war to end before they start working on countermeasures to your technology?
The question struck at one of Korthak's deepest concerns. Imperial intelligence reports had indeed indicated unusual levels of innovation and development occurring in human territories, despite the ongoing military pressure.
You suggest that military pressure actually accelerates human technological development?
I don't suggest it, I guarantee it. Every weapon you've used against us, every tactic you've employed, every piece of Imperial technology you've deployed has been studied, analyzed, and reverse-engineered by human researchers working around the clock.
And, because we're facing annihilation, we're not worried about safety protocols or long-term testing.
We're developing and deploying countermeasures as fast as we can think of them.
Korthak consulted his tablet, accessing recent intelligence reports from the human conflict zone.
What he found there made his expression grow increasingly grim. According to our latest tactical assessments, human weapons technology has advanced by approximately 30% since the beginning of this conflict. Their shield systems have improved by even greater margins.
Exactly my point.
You're not just fighting a war, General, you're conducting an advanced course in military engineering for the most adaptable species you've ever encountered. Every day this conflict continues, we get better at fighting you. But surely there are limits to how much a species can improve under pressure.
Marcus smiled. Are there?
General, have you studied the history of human warfare?
Do you know what happens to our technology during major conflicts? Korthak accessed the Imperial Historical Database on human civilization.
According to our records, your species has experienced significant technological advancement during periods of military conflict.
Significant is an understatement.
Humans went from flying in machines made of wood and fabric to breaking the sound barrier in less than 50 years. We went from chemical explosives to nuclear weapons in the span of a single generation. When humans are forced to innovate quickly, we don't just make incremental improvements, we make revolutionary leaps.
You cannot possibly achieve technological parity with the Empire in a matter of months or years. Parity? General, who said anything about parity?
Marcus leaned forward, his voice taking on an edge of excitement.
We're not trying to match your technology, we're trying to make it irrelevant. Impossible. Is it?
Your empire has spent thousands of years perfecting energy shields, faster-than-light communication, and directed energy weapons.
Sophisticated, elegant solutions to complex problems. But what happens when someone approaches those same problems from a completely different angle?
Korthak found himself genuinely intrigued despite his better judgment.
What angle? Brute force and reckless creativity. While you've been perfecting energy shields, human engineers have been developing kinetic weapons that don't care how sophisticated your deflectors are.
While you've been securing your faster-than-light communications, we've been working on quantum entanglement systems that operate outside your network protocols entirely. Such developments would require resources and time that a species under siege simply cannot afford.
Would they? Or would they require exactly the kind of desperate ingenuity that humans specialize in?
Marcus stood and began pacing around the small chamber.
General, do you know what happened when humans first encountered alien technology? Enlighten me. We didn't try to understand it properly or reverse engineer it carefully.
We tore it apart, figured out what made it work, and then built our own versions using whatever materials and methods we had available. The results were crude, unreliable, and frequently dangerous. They were also remarkably effective. Korthak's cybernetic implants were rapidly processing tactical simulations based on Marcus's descriptions. The scenarios they generated were deeply troubling from an imperial perspective.
You speak as if technological sophistication were a disadvantage in warfare.
Not a disadvantage, but definitely a vulnerability. Your weapons and systems are optimized for specific conditions and applications. They work perfectly within their design parameters.
But what happens when someone changes the rules entirely? What happens when you encounter weapons that shouldn't work according to established scientific principles but somehow do anyway?
Such weapons would violate known laws of physics.
Would they?
Or would they simply exploit aspects of physics that your scientists haven't bothered to investigate because they seemed impractical or inefficient? Marcus stopped pacing and looked directly at Korthak.
General, human science has always been driven by practical necessity rather than theoretical elegance.
We don't care if something is supposed to be impossible. If it works, we use it. The chamber door opened, and Commander Vextar entered with Lady Siren. Both looked as though they had spent another sleepless night planning new approaches to break the stubborn prisoner. General, Vextar said formally, we have prepared additional stress protocols for the human. Perhaps today we will achieve better results. Actually, Commander, I have been having a rather enlightening conversation with Captain Chen. I believe we may have been approaching this entire situation incorrectly.
Vextar and Siren exchanged puzzled glances.
In all their years of service under Korthak, they had never heard him speak with such uncertainty about an interrogation strategy.
Sir? Vextar prompted.
Captain Chen has been explaining certain aspects of human culture and psychology that may have significant strategic implications for our ongoing military operations.
Marcus looked at the three aliens with something approaching sympathy.
General Korthak is beginning to understand that this interrogation was doomed from the start.
You can't break something that's designed to get stronger under pressure.
All beings have breaking points, Siren insisted, her mental presence already beginning to probe at Marcus's consciousness.
Do they?
Lady Siren, how many times have you attempted to crack my mental defenses over the past 3 days?
Numerous times. And what has been the result of each attempt?
Siren paused, her psychic senses analyzing Marcus's current mental state compared to when she had first encountered him. What she found there made her step backward in shock.
Impossible.
Your psychological defenses have actually strengthened since our first session.
Exactly. Every time you attack my mind, I learn something new about psychic manipulation.
Every time Commander Vextar tries to break me physically, I develop better pain management techniques. Every time General Korthak challenges my reasoning, I become more articulate in defending my principles. Marcus sat back down, his expression calm but determined. You've been treating this interrogation as if it were a standard extraction of information from a defeated enemy. But what you've actually been doing is providing advanced resistance training to a human military officer. We have been torturing you for 3 days, Vextar protested.
Yes, and I'm grateful for the experience.
When I'm eventually rescued or exchanged, I'll be able to teach other human prisoners exactly how to endure everything you've shown me.
You've turned me into a walking manual for resisting Imperial interrogation techniques. The three aliens stared at their prisoner in growing dismay.
They were beginning to realize that their sophisticated interrogation methods had not only failed to break him, they had actually made him more dangerous as an enemy asset.
This is unacceptable, Vextar growled. We will find methods that work. Will you? Commander, what methods haven't you tried yet?
Vextar began to catalog the various techniques still available to them, but, as he spoke, his voice grew increasingly uncertain. They had indeed exhausted most of their standard approaches, and the humans' resistance had only grown stronger with each attempt. Perhaps, General Korthak suggested quietly, we should consider the possibility that Captain Chen cannot be broken through conventional means.
Then, we use unconventional means, Vextar replied.
Such as? Enhanced interrogation procedures.
Neural extraction devices.
Psychic amplifiers that will allow Lady Siren to bypass his mental defenses entirely.
Marcus looked genuinely interested. Fascinating. Commander, how many Imperial personnel have undergone training with those enhanced procedures?
What do you mean?
I mean, how many of your own people have experienced neural extraction or amplified psychic assault? How do you know what the limits and side effects might be?
Vextar realized where the human was leading the conversation.
We don't test such procedures on Imperial personnel.
Of course not. Which means you're about to experiment on me with techniques that you don't fully understand, using equipment that hasn't been tested on beings similar to your intended subject.
Marcus smiled slightly. I've got to admit, Commander, from a research perspective, this is an incredible opportunity.
You speak as if you welcome more sophisticated torture. I welcome any opportunity to learn how Imperial technology works, especially the classified systems that you don't normally expose to enemy observation.
Lady Siren's psychic senses were screaming warnings at her. General, this human is not reacting normally to threats of enhanced interrogation.
His stress levels are actually decreasing as we describe more extreme measures.
Because I'm learning to think like you, Marcus explained.
The more time I spend with the three of you, the better I understand how Imperial military personnel think, how they make decisions, how they respond to unexpected situations. You're giving me insights into Imperial psychology that no human has ever possessed before.
Korthak's strategic mind was rapidly calculating the intelligence value of what Marcus was describing.
A human officer with detailed knowledge of Imperial interrogation procedures, military psychology, and technological capabilities would be worth more to Earth's war effort than entire fleets of captured ships. You are attempting to manipulate us into releasing you, Korthak accused.
Am I?
General, I've told you repeatedly that I'm not going anywhere until my government arranges a prisoner exchange or until the war ends.
I have no interest in escaping. But, I am very interested in learning everything I can about your empire while I'm here.
Why? Because knowledge is power, and power is what humans need to level the playing field in this conflict. Marcus leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed despite his dire circumstances. Every minute I spend observing the three of you is a minute in which I'm gathering intelligence that could save human lives and help us develop more effective resistance strategies.
The three elite guards found themselves in an unprecedented position.
Their prisoner was not trying to escape or negotiate for better treatment. Instead, he was treating his captivity as an intelligence-gathering operation, extracting valuable information about Imperial methods and personnel simply by engaging them in conversation.
This is unacceptable, Vextar declared. We cannot allow a prisoner to conduct intelligence operations against his captors.
Then, what do you suggest, Commander?
Marcus asked. Solitary confinement?
That would just give me time to organize everything I've learned so far.
More torture? We've established that only makes me stronger. Execution?
That would turn me into a martyr and deny you any possibility of eventual cooperation.
There must be some method that will work.
There might be, Marcus admitted. But finding it would require you to understand something fundamental about human psychology that your empire has never grasped. Which is that some beings are willing to endure infinite suffering for finite but absolute principles. You keep trying to find the right amount of pressure to apply, but you're assuming that enough pressure will always eventually overcome any resistance.
That assumption is wrong.
Lady Siren made another attempt to penetrate Marcus's mental defenses, this time focusing all of her psychic power on a single, overwhelming assault designed to shatter his consciousness entirely. Marcus felt the attack like a storm of mental energy, but, instead of resisting it directly, he seemed to absorb and redirect it. When the assault ended, he looked at Siren with genuine admiration.
Remarkable technique, Lady Siren.
I can see why the Empire values your abilities so highly. But, you're still thinking about this incorrectly.
How so? You're trying to break my mind by attacking it with external force. But, human minds don't work that way. We don't break under pressure, we adapt to it. Every psychic assault you launch just teaches me more about how to defend against similar attacks. Siren staggered backward, exhausted by the failed assault. This should not be possible. No mind can withstand that level of psychic force.
No mind can resist it, Marcus corrected.
But a human mind doesn't resist, it adapts. We're like water, Lady Siren. You can't break water by hitting it harder.
General Korthak stood slowly, his massive frame casting a shadow across the small chamber. Captain Chen, I believe it is time for us to discuss the larger implications of this situation.
I'm listening, General.
If what you say about human adaptability is accurate, then the Empire faces a strategic challenge unlike any in our history.
We cannot defeat an enemy that grows stronger through adversity.
Now you're beginning to understand the real nature of this conflict.
But surely human adaptability must have limits. No species can evolve indefinitely.
Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering the question carefully.
You're right, General. Human adaptability does have limits.
But those limits are much higher than you realize, and they're not fixed points. They can be expanded through training, experience, and necessity.
Explain.
A human who has never faced serious adversity might break under relatively mild pressure. But a human who has survived multiple challenges becomes capable of enduring much more. And a human who has been specifically trained to resist torture and manipulation. Marcus spread his hands.
Well, you've spent 3 days finding out what that looks like. You received specialized training? Every human military officer does.
But, more importantly, every human child receives basic training in enduring hardship, facing fear, and maintaining principles under pressure.
It's built into our educational system, our cultural traditions, our family structures. Commander Vextar's frustration finally boiled over. Enough of this philosophical discussion. The human will break because all beings break eventually. It is simply a matter of finding the right pressure point.
Commander, Marcus said gently, you've been looking for my pressure point for 3 days.
How much longer are you prepared to search? The question highlighted the fundamental problem with their approach.
Resources were limited, time was precious, and every day spent on this interrogation was a day not spent on other military objectives. Perhaps, General Korthak suggested, it is time to consider alternative approaches to this situation.
Such as? Vextar demanded.
Such as recognizing that we may be facing an enemy that cannot be defeated through conventional means. The words hung in the air like a death sentence for everything the 3 elite guards had believed about imperial superiority and the inevitability of conquest. Marcus looked at them with something approaching compassion. General, that's the most intelligent thing anyone has said in this chamber since I arrived.
You agree that humans cannot be conquered?
I believe that humans cannot be conquered using the methods that have worked against other species. But that doesn't mean we're undefeatable, it just means you'll need to develop entirely new strategies if you want to win this war.
What kind of strategies? Marcus smiled. That, General, would be telling.
And, despite our fascinating conversations, I'm still not going to provide intelligence that could be used against my own species. The 3rd day of interrogation ended with the 3 elite guards in a state of profound uncertainty. They had not only failed to break their prisoner, they had begun to question the fundamental assumptions underlying their entire military doctrine. The human sat before them exactly as he had for the past 3 days, unbroken and uncompromising. But the chamber itself had been transformed into something neither side had anticipated, a classroom where a member of a supposedly primitive species was teaching the Empire's most experienced interrogators about the nature of true resistance. And, with each lesson, the 3 guards were becoming less certain about the inevitability of Imperial victory and more worried about the possibility that they had underestimated their enemy in ways that could prove catastrophic for the Empire itself.
The 4th day brought an unprecedented development.
For the first time since Marcus's capture, all 3 elite guards entered the detention chamber together, but, instead of interrogation equipment, they carried chairs and what appeared to be a formal recording device. Marcus observed their unusual behavior with interest. This looks different from our previous sessions. General Korthak activated the recording device and sat down across from the human prisoner.
Captain Chen, we would like to propose a change in our relationship. I'm listening. Over the past 3 days, you have demonstrated resistance capabilities that exceed anything in our experience.
You have also provided insights into human military psychology and cultural adaptation that we find strategically significant. And we believe that continued attempts to extract information through traditional interrogation methods would be counterproductive for all parties involved. Marcus leaned back slightly, his expression carefully neutral.
What exactly are you proposing, General?
Commander Vextar shifted uncomfortably in his chair. It was clear that this new approach went against every instinct he had developed over centuries of military service. We propose a series of formal discussions rather than interrogations. Information exchange rather than extraction.
You want to negotiate?
We want to understand, Lady Siren interjected. Your species represents a type of enemy we have never encountered before. Our standard conquest methodologies appear to be not only ineffective but actually counterproductive when applied to human populations. Marcus considered this carefully.
You're asking me to help you develop more effective strategies for conquering my own species?
We are asking you to help us understand whether conquest is even possible, Korthak replied. Or whether the Empire needs to consider alternative approaches to human integration. The words carried implications that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. For the first time in Imperial history, these elite military officers were questioning whether a target species could actually be conquered at all. Before I respond to that, Marcus said slowly, I need to understand something.
Is this conversation being recorded for intelligence purposes, or are you genuinely seeking to understand the strategic situation you've gotten yourselves into?
Both, Korthak admitted. But, primarily the latter. Captain Shen, in 48 hours of interrogation, you have caused us to question fundamental assumptions that have guided Imperial military doctrine for millennia. Whether or not you provide specific intelligence data, you have already changed our understanding of this conflict in ways that will have far-reaching consequences.
And, you're willing to admit that officially?
We are willing to admit it to each other. Whether it becomes part of the official record depends on what we learn from these discussions. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, obviously weighing his options carefully. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a new tone of cautious cooperation.
All right, General. Let's try a different approach.
But, I want to establish some ground rules first.
State your terms.
I will discuss general strategic concepts and provide historical context for human behavior patterns.
I will not provide specific military intelligence that could be used to target human installations or personnel.
I will answer questions about human psychology and cultural adaptation, but I reserve the right to refuse to answer anything that violates my oath as an officer. Vextar started to object, but Korthak silenced him with a gesture.
Acceptable terms, Captain.
We are more interested in understanding the broader strategic picture than in obtaining tactical intelligence. Then, let's start with the most important question, Marcus said.
Why do you think this war is going so differently from your previous conquests?
Human technological adaptation has exceeded our projections, Korthak replied. Your species appears capable of reverse engineering and improving upon captured Imperial technology much faster than should be theoretically possible.
That's a symptom, not a cause. Why do you think humans can adapt so quickly?
Lady Siren leaned forward, her psychic senses focused intently on Marcus's responses. We believe it has something to do with your species' evolutionary history on an unusually challenging homeworld.
Partially correct.
But, you're still thinking about this in terms of individual capabilities rather than systemic behavior patterns. Explain the difference, Korthak requested. Individual capabilities are things like intelligence, physical strength, or natural resistance to environmental stress. Systemic behavior patterns are cultural and psychological traits that affect how an entire species responds to challenges. Marcus paused, organizing his thoughts. Most species you've conquered develop stable civilizations and, then, maintain them for thousands of years.
Humans never achieved true stability. We've been adapting to changing circumstances for our entire recorded history.
But, surely all species face environmental changes.
Not like humans do.
General, in the past 10,000 years alone, humans have survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun for years, global pandemics that killed 1/3 of our population, and wars so destructive they threatened the existence of civilization itself. And, we didn't just survive these catastrophes, we used them as opportunities to develop new technologies, new social systems, and new survival strategies.
Vextar consulted his data tablet.
According to Imperial historical records, your species has experienced an unusually high number of existential threats compared to other spacefaring civilizations.
Exactly. And what do you think that does to a species' psychology over time? It would create.
Korthak paused, his cybernetic implants processing the implications.
It would create a population that views existential threats as normal rather than exceptional. Now you're getting it. To humans, your invasion isn't unprecedented, it's just the latest in a long series of challenges that threaten to destroy us.
We've developed institutional knowledge about how to survive when survival seems impossible. Lady Siren's psychic probes detected something unexpected in Marcus's mental patterns.
Captain, you're not just talking about cultural adaptation. There's something else, something that makes humans different at a fundamental psychological level. What do you sense?
When I probe your mind, I find layers of mental conditioning that seem almost artificial.
But our scans confirm that you have no cybernetic modifications or genetic enhancement. How is this possible? Marcus smiled slightly.
Lady Siren, you're detecting the results of human education and training systems. Every human child undergoes years of systematic conditioning designed to build psychological resilience, critical thinking skills, and resistance to mental manipulation.
All human children? All of them. We call it school.
The three aliens exchanged confused glances.
You train your entire population in resistance techniques? We train our entire population in survival techniques. Mental resistance is just part of that training.
Marcus leaned forward, his voice taking on an educational tone. Human children spend 12 to 16 years learning how to process information critically, how to function under stress, how to maintain their principles when those principles are challenged, and how to continue working toward long-term goals even when immediate circumstances seem hopeless.
Korthak's strategic mind was rapidly processing the implications. You are describing a systematic program to create a population that is inherently resistant to conquest and subjugation.
We're describing a systematic program to create a population that can survive in a universe that keeps trying to kill them.
The resistance to conquest is just a side effect.
But, surely, Vextar protested, this conditioning cannot be as comprehensive as you suggest.
Not every human can possess the same level of resistance you have demonstrated. You're right.
I've had military training that goes far beyond standard education.
But, Commander, how many humans do you think would need to demonstrate this level of resistance for your conquest to become impossible?
The question struck at the heart of Imperial planning assumptions.
Their conquest strategy depended on breaking enemy morale through demonstration of overwhelming force. But, what if the enemy population was psychologically conditioned to view overwhelming force as just another problem to be solved? 10%?
Vextar guessed reluctantly.
Try 90%, Marcus corrected.
The difference between me and a typical human civilian isn't the presence or absence of resistance conditioning, it's the degree and focus of that conditioning.
I've been trained to resist torture and manipulation specifically.
But any human adult has been trained to maintain their core beliefs and continue functioning under extreme stress. Lady Siren attempted to verify this claim by accessing Marcus's memories of human society. What she found there confirmed his statements in ways that disturbed her profoundly. General, she reported quietly, this human's memories contain extensive examples of civilian populations continuing to function normally under conditions that would cause complete social breakdown in most species. They appear to treat warfare, natural disasters, and economic collapse as temporary inconveniences rather than civilization-ending catastrophes.
Because that's what they are to humans, Marcus explained. Temporary inconveniences that require adaptation and problem-solving.
We've been dealing with these kinds of challenges for so long that we've developed cultural institutions specifically designed to maintain social cohesion during apparent crises. Korthak activated additional data displays, showing Imperial intelligence assessments of human population centers under attack.
Our reports indicate that human civilian populations are indeed continuing normal activities despite ongoing military operations in their vicinity. Of course they are. General, human children go to school during bombing raids. Human farmers plant crops in the middle of war zones. Human scientists continue their research even when their laboratories are being targeted by enemy forces. We don't stop living just because someone is trying to kill us.
This behavior pattern would make occupation and pacification extraordinarily difficult, Vextar realized.
Impossible, more likely. Commander, how do you occupy a population that treats occupation as just another form of bad weather?
How do you pacify people who keep going about their daily business regardless of how many soldiers you station on their streets? The three elite guards were beginning to understand the true scope of the challenge they faced. This was not just a military conquest, it was an attempt to subjugate a species that was fundamentally psychologically immune to subjugation.
But, surely, Korthak said, sufficient force could break even human resistance eventually. Could it? General, what do you think happens to human innovation and adaptability when you increase the pressure on our populations?
Based on your previous statements, I would assume it accelerates.
Exponentially.
Right now, human research and development programs are advancing faster than at any previous point in our history. Every Imperial weapon system you deploy against us becomes a new engineering challenge for our scientists to solve. Every tactic you use becomes a new problem for our strategists to address. You're not just fighting a war, you're conducting an advanced education program for the most problem-solving oriented species in the galaxy. Lady Siren made another attempt to probe Marcus's mind, this time looking for any trace of doubt or uncertainty about his claims.
What she found instead was absolute confidence backed by extensive knowledge of human historical precedents. This human truly